and we've reached the recap stage. We're going to now just discuss the points that we went through. So please do plan your questions for us. They're coming up soon. So we started off the webinar speaking about the fact that South Africa is a tax residency system and how we determine tax residency. We had the ordinarily residence test and the physical presence test. There are the two tests for South African tax residency. It is important to dive into those very specifically with your practitioner. Ordinarily residence test being more subjective and the physical presence test being more objective. Do you also consider your other jurisdictions and where you become tax resident there as well?
Yeah, exactly that. And it's also important when you're doing this assessment is, and we spoke about the double taxation agreement rules, is you can't just assess South Africa. You really have to look at that other jurisdiction. And we touched on that double taxation agreement between the UK and South Africa. And just to make a note that it's not as simple as just sort of doing that assessment and looking at what's on the paper, but really to assess everything, in total. And not just line items.
Yeah, and I mean, reminder to you guys as well, like Erin said, it's the end test. So it dives in quite in detail. You have to be quite certain, and you don't want to get to that final part where they have to decide for you. Great. Then we moved on to the process of breaking tax residency and how to notify SARS. Again, it is important to delve into the fact that there's going to be a documentary evidence needed. The burden is on you. Always remember that. The burden of proof is on the taxpayer for everything, be it your normal assessment that gets done on your tax return, your normal IRP5, and any documents they require there, all the way through to this final seizing of your tax residency, to your final deregistration from SARS, should you wish to do that. You need to be aware of how you notify things. That nothing automatically happens. You need to be letting SARS know and formally seizing your tax residency, tax immigrating, as we call it.
And super important. And I think, and we didn't really touch on this a lot, but just to touch on, I think a lot of people at a young age, they go abroad and they start to live abroad, and then they decide they're not going to come back to South Africa. They've never been a taxpayer in South Africa, so in their mind, there's nothing to do. But there is something to do, and there are consequences of not doing anything. So I think it's important to note that anyone who's got South African citizenship or who by birth was here, they need to make sure that they've assessed themselves to see if this would be relevant or not.
Absolutely. And even people, just to add to that, Erin, even people that have left so long ago that they think it's nothing important, but they've got an inheritance situation happening in South Africa, an investment situation, anything to do with South Africa, any ties you've had by birth, just like Erin said, any ties you've had by inheritance, by investment, just get assessed.
Exactly. And I think, like you said there with the inheritance, it's going to create a problem and pose a problem, quite a significant one, if you haven't ceased your tax residency and you've got inheritance sitting in South Africa. To get that offshore is going to be quite difficult unless you follow the proper protocol.
Yeah.
All right. We then moved on to the concept of a deemed disposal. So that's that Section 9H charge, not a NICE charge, assessing your worldwide assets, and also looking at quite specific assets that you may have that you would think would fall outside of the net, really just assessing it all, and how that is deemed to be disposed of when you exit out of South Africa.
Great. The challenges faced by expatriates, I mean, you don't want to be double taxed. These agreements do exist, double taxation agreements. The way to seize your tax residency, tax immigration, there's all these aspects that can help you. But remember, it's not automatically applied. You have to do your due diligence, apply correctly, do it professionally, do it the legal ways. There are so many challenges, so many changes in legislation. It's daunting for expatriates. You do move abroad your entire life. You want to, there's so many reasons people leave, and every single one of them is tied back to tax. Unfortunately, you cannot escape that so easily. So do make sure you have your affairs in order.
And then we went on to withholding tax, just quite a nice one. Assess yourself under the double taxation agreement. Have a look to see what income you're earning in South Africa, see if the double taxation agreement has a lower rate, and just make sure you can have a bit of tax saving in that manner.
Yep. And there's so many perks that come along, with tax emigrating. I mean, I think we don't want to scare you guys. We've spoken about all the scary things, I think, so far, but I mean, withholding tax relief is one of the retirement annuities, as we touched on. That's a great tax efficiency. I think the main positive of tax emigrating is that SARS can no longer tax your foreign income and assets. That's the important part. So don't forget why you are considering this. You have moved abroad, or you're going to, or you've got family that is living abroad. They need to protect that foreign income and assets. They need to ensure that SARS has that SARS is not reaching for it and putting it in their pocket.